For one of the foundational practices of our faith, we have to think in terms of some of those things that go together. That there are some things that are not the same without the other. For example, food and community just seem to go together, that community is not community if the people never eat together. Or worship and singing, for example, that what would worship be without singing with one another? Or hope and struggle. One always accompanies the other. The two of those things that are foundational for our faith is Sabbath and work. That one is always essential to the other, and vice versa. That we practice our faith by practicing Sabbath and work. But in the midst of our world, which is always pushing us towards efficiency, achievement, and comparison, it can get rather difficult to practice Sabbath and work. That we feel that constant pressure to deliver, and to deliver quickly. Or we are able to be connected at all times through the benefit of technology, which can just exaggerate that sense of being busy. And then finally, if we are not careful, we can find ourselves constantly comparing ourselves to others, thinking that we are not keeping up, that everybody else is getting more done than we are. And the balance for all of this, in the midst of that kind of world, is the practice of Sabbath and work. But Sabbath is not just another item on our to-do list. It reaches back to the story of creation, where we find God working for 6 days and then resting on the seventh. That this rhythm to our weeks of working and then rest reminds us that God is at the center of creation, not us. That life and all that we do does not ultimately depend on our efforts, but creation relies upon God's goodness and grace, and it always has since the very beginning. Now, we also find the Sabbath in that list of the 10 commandments, but perhaps most importantly, in thinking about the Sabbath, is the first commandment, that thou shalt not have any other gods above God. That the practice of Sabbath reminds us that God is the center of creation. But we need to be careful, because Sabbath and the practice of Sabbath is more than a thou shalt not. That practicing Sabbath is not just a list of do not do this and do not do that. That the purpose of Sabbath is rooted in joy. Because when God stopped working, God looked at creation and said, "It is good." And God looked at humanity and said, "It is very good." That when we pause on the Sabbath, it is for joy. Because at the center of creation, we find God's goodness and grace. By comparison or contrast, the one who demands constant work is not God, but Pharaoh. That as we think back to the Hebrew people oppressed in the shackles of slavery there in Egypt, it was Pharaoh that demanded constant work. And in the book of Deuteronomy, there is a connection made between this contrast of Pharaoh demanding work and God not demanding constant work. As it says in Deuteronomy, speaking about the Sabbath, observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, or your ox or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or the resident alien in your towns, so that your male and female slave may rest as well as you. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. That as opposed to Pharaoh, who demanded constant work, God invites us to rest, remembering that God's grace and goodness are at the center of creation and our lives. And as we think about our work is not an enemy of the Sabbath. Rather, it is an outgrowth of the Sabbath. That the practice of Sabbath clarifies our lives and prepares us for our work. That as we worship on Sunday, for example, worship shapes who we are. And then we take who we are into every aspect of our lives. So our work is not just our job. Our work, as we look at it through our faith, is not limited to a paycheck. It is everything that we do with our lives. It is how we spend our time throughout our week. It includes our relationships, tasks, errands, job, volunteering, our to-do list. And the Sabbath clarifies what is most important, what it is that we take with us, that is a part of us, that we carry into our work throughout the week. There are several ways in which the practice of Sabbath gives us clarity for our work. The first is it enables us to rest. And when we are able to rest, we find the source of our creativity. Our energy is renewed for the days ahead, and we have been able to recover from the days behind. That Sabbath gives us the rest we need for our work. And second, the practice of Sabbath teaches us to listen, which we carry into our week and into our work. It teaches us how to pay attention to the opportunities that are around us. It helps us know how to practice discernment as we make decisions throughout the week. It teaches us how to relate to others in ways that are life-giving for them and for us. Third, it gives us renewed purpose, that in pausing for the Sabbath, in that rest and renewal, we discover the purpose of our lives, the guiding principles that we live by, our overall goals that govern what is most good, our convictions that serve as a rudder for going forward. It teaches us what to do and how to do it. And then lastly, and perhaps most important, the practice of Sabbath clarifies for us in our work the importance of dignity. That we, as much as it might feel like this way, are not defined by our work. We are not defined by what we do. That our identity is defined by God, that we are God's beloved. We are God's children. And as we go forth into our work and our lives throughout the week, we are to hold on to that and to treat others with the same kind of dignity as the children of God. There is that old Latin word vocare, which means vocation. Oftentimes, this gets intertwined with our work in such a way that our job is our vocation. But our vocation includes all that we do. It is our calling, our purpose. It is clarified by the practice of Sabbath, and it is shaped by God's goodness and grace that's found at the center of creation. So each week we work, we give our energy to all that we do, and then we rest, rediscovering those things that matter the most. Things like the love of neighbor, or our gifts and time and what they mean, or our care for creation, the world around us. That we practice Sabbath and work, those two things that always go together and that lead us back to God, who is at the center of all creation. Amen.